Today, we're diving into the mind of one of Stoicism's most powerful figures, a man whose wisdom has inspired everyone from Roman emperors to modern-day leaders. His name was Epictetus, and his story, well, it starts with a pretty fascinating contradiction. And here it is. This is what makes his story just so incredible. Epictetus, one of the most practical and influential philosophers in all of history, never wrote down a single word of his teachings. Not one. So that leaves us with this huge question, right? If he left nothing behind in writing, how on earth did his philosophy manage to survive for 2,000 years and shape how we think about resilience and freedom today? Well, the answer is all in his extraordinary life. You see, to really get Epictetus, you have to wrap your head around this stunning paradox at the very heart of his life. He was a slave who taught some of the most powerful people on earth what it really means to be free. His story kicks off in Hierapolis, what is now Turkey, around the year 50 AD. He wasn't born into some fancy family of thinkers or aristocrats. Nope. He was born into the absolute harshest conditions imaginable: slavery. As a young man, he was sold and taken to Rome, the very center of the world at the time. His master was a man named Epictetus, who was a wealthy and powerful official in the court of the infamous Emperor Nero. I mean, just try to imagine that, the absolute peak of Roman power and cruelty, and he's seeing it all from the very bottom of the social ladder. His life was just defined by hardship, but here's the thing, it was these very challenges that forged his philosophy. This wasn't some abstract theory cooked up in an ivory tower. It was a practical guide to survival, created in the real world. For him, philosophy wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity. It was how you find freedom even when your body is literally in chains. Now here's where things get really interesting. In this incredible twist of fate, his master, Epictetus, and we don't know why, actually allowed Epictetus to go to lectures by Musonius Rufus, one of the most respected Stoic philosophers in Rome. This was his education, his window into a world of ideas that would ultimately set him free, long before he was ever legally a free man. Okay, so let's quickly trace his journey. He's born a slave in 50 AD. Then, around 60 AD, after Nero dies, he's freed, but his troubles were far from over. In 89 AD, the Emperor Domitian gets paranoid about philosophers and kicks all of them out of Rome. So Epictetus is forced into exile, and he eventually dies decades later, around 130 AD, in Greece. But this is where his resilience just shines through. He didn't see exile as the end, not at all. He saw it as a new beginning. In Nicopolis, a bustling city in western Greece, he started his own philosophy school, and he became hugely popular and respected. He had gone from a slave in Rome to a master teacher in his own right. So what was it? What was the core idea that drew so many people to his school? Well, it all centered on one single, powerful, and totally life-altering concept: understanding the crucial difference between what you can control and what you can't. He called it the Dichotomy of Control. It's a simple but really profound practice. You carefully separate everything in your life into two buckets: what's in your power and what isn't. And according to Epictetus, our peace of mind, our happiness, depends entirely on focusing our energy only on that first bucket. And you can hear it right from the man himself. He said the things in our charge are naturally free and unstoppable, but everything else, it's weak, dependent, and it belongs to other people. And just listen to that word he chose, slavish. For a man who actually lived as a slave, that word had to carry some serious weight. And this chart just breaks it down perfectly. What's in our power, or epimen, as they said in Greek? Our judgments, our choices, our desires. That's pretty much it. And what's not in our power? Well, our body. It gets sick, it gets old. Our stuff, it can be lost or stolen. Our reputation, that's all about what other people think. And focusing on that side of the chart, he said, is the source of all our anxiety. So this brings us back to that big mystery we started with. If Epictetus never wrote any of this stuff down, how in the world do we know about it? The answer is that his entire legacy was saved by one very devoted student. Let's just pause on this one more time, because it's wild. This brilliant mind, who came up with one of the most practical philosophies for living a good life, never picked up a pen to write it down. The hero of our story, in a way, is a student of his named Arrian. Arrian was a historian and an official, and he was so captivated by his teacher's lectures that he took these incredibly detailed notes, kind of like Plato did for Socrates.
Arrian then compiled all these notes into two essential books. First, you have the Discourses, which are the long, detailed lectures. Originally, there were 8 books of these, but sadly, only 4 made it to us today. And second, there's the Enchiridion, which means the manual, or the handbook. Think of it as a greatest hits collection, a short, punchy guide to living a Stoic life.
And here's the truly remarkable part: how fragile this whole legacy was. His entire surviving work comes down to us through one single manuscript, copied by some monk way back in the 11th or 12th century. His wisdom came so incredibly close to being lost forever.
But it wasn't lost. And because it survived, its influence spread in some really powerful and unexpected ways, shaping history from the very top down.
I mean, get this. Epictetus, the former slave, directly influenced the most powerful man in the world, the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. The thinking is that Epictetus taught a guy named Junius Rusticus, who then became the main Stoic teacher for Marcus Aurelius, introducing him to these very ideas.
His influence kind of faded in Europe during the Middle Ages, but like so much classical wisdom, it was rediscovered during the Renaissance. Suddenly, a whole new generation of thinkers was captivated by his practical, empowering philosophy, and his ideas started to spread all over again.
You know, when we look at the ruins of his school in Nicopolis, we're not just looking at old stones. We're looking at the actual place where a set of ideas so powerful they could outlast empires were taught. Ideas that were born from slavery, that showed an emperor how to rule, and that still teach us how to live today.
And that brings us to the end, but it also brings us right back to the beginning. His philosophy isn't just history, it's a practical tool. And it leaves us with probably the most important question we can ever ask ourselves. When you strip everything else away, what in your life is truly and completely under your control?